Welcome to Praise to the King of Kings, heralding the glory of God and the Lordship of Jesus Christ over all of life and all the world. Now that the West has fallen, October 8th, 2020. There can be no question, even among the most optimistic of us, that we are in a bad way. Our neighbors to the south look about ready for civil war, and pending the results of the November election, only God knows what's in store. Here in Canada, things are in some ways looking similarly bleak, with Marxist secular ideals having worked their way through nearly every institution, with their ideologues showing themselves more than willing to censor and stifle their opponents. For many Christians, this negative trajectory, along with other world events, are seen as clear evidence that Jesus must be returning soon. Within this framework, cultural decline is almost seen as a good thing. After all, who doesn't want Christ to return in their lifetime? The unfortunate side effect of such thinking is that it produces something of a retreatist mindset. The idea is that we can just sort of pull back and wait for Jesus to come and fix this mess. So we huddle together talking about how messed up things are while we wait for the next stage of end time events to unfold. An extreme example of this mindset is seen in the false predictions of Harold Camping. Camping was convinced that Christ would return in 1994 or possibly 2011. When 1994 came and went with no apocalypse, 2011 became the focus. Now, some of Camping's followers were so convinced by his predictions that they sold their possessions, quit their jobs, and stopped investing in their children's college funds, giving large sums of money to publicize Camping's predictions. Well, the dates of Camping's predictions came and went, and I can only imagine the people standing around looking at each other, asking, now what? Now, unfortunately, this mindset is not uncommon in church history. We are far from the first generation to suppose that we are the last generation. Many Christians through the centuries have seen the world events in their day as clear indications that the end times were upon them. Possible candidates for Gog and Magog, evil nations making war on the saints in the end times, have included the Huns, Goths, Muslims, Hungarians, Avars, Mongols, the 10 lost tribes of Israel, the Turks, the papacy, Native Americans, Russia, and of course, more recently, Bill Gates. Okay, so he's technically seen as the Antichrist, not Gog and Magog, but you get my point. Going back as far as the 4th century, the activities of these groups and people were seen as quote-unquote clear evidence that the world was facing its last days. Hindsight allows us to look back at the people in the 4th and 5th centuries and feel just a tad embarrassed for them. Any of them who adopted a retreatist mindset was unlikely to accomplish much of anything for Christ. When you're convinced that the return of Christ is right around the corner, it seems like a poor time to start a Christian school. Looking at history, I, for one, do not want to be another embarrassed name in a long line of Christians who turned out to be wrong about the imminent return of Christ. I certainly wouldn't want my speculations to cause me to pull back from the building, fighting, or evangelizing that I've been called to. If people saw difficult days ahead, how much better off would they and their children have been if instead of waiting around for the rapture, they had been training their children, equipping them with the tools and the worldview they would need to survive in the difficult times? How much better off if they had brought the gospel to bear on the situation, holding forth the only message that could transform a heart. Stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning, and be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast, so that they may open the door to him at once when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds awake when he comes. Who then is the faithful and wise manager whom his master will set over his household to give them their portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Luke 12:35-37 and 42-43. Jesus says that since we don't know when he's coming back, we ought to be all the more diligent to ensure that we are found serving him when he returns. Now, there's truly no downside here. If Jesus' return is not imminent, then we better be building, making disciples, and equipping them for what lies ahead. And if he is about to return, what could possibly be better than to be found by your master hard at the work he assigned to you? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. So this is an invitation. Join the work of the kingdom. Find a church that knows how to build and to fight, or is at least open to learning how. Make disciples, build for the future, get married, have children, raise them in the discipline and admonition of the Lord. Equip them so that they'll have the tools and worldview to thrive, rebuild, and make disciples in whatever civilization they find themselves in. If the West does fall, Christ will still be the king. The church will still endure, and there will be a strong need for Christians with a backbone and a solid worldview to live and build and to make disciples as Christ's ambassadors in that place. No question that our culture is on a bad trajectory. Our current culture worships sin and death. It makes war on fertility. It mutilates healthy bodies, chemically castrating and sterilizing men and women through hormone therapy in so-called sex change operations. It condemns God's design for marriage, condemning God's good plan as heteronormativity or patriarchy. And it worships death through the bloody sacrament of abortion. Any culture that murders its children, opposes the family, attempts to sever sex from marriage and childbearing, is a culture that has signed its own death warrant. Whether our children will continue to battle this culture, or whether they will find themselves facing a radically different cultural landscape, the need will be the same: faithfulness and fruitfulness. A people who will either stand against the cultural decay or build in the ruins. A people who will honor marriage, celebrate children, and disciple them. This ought to be what we are aiming to produce in the future. A people whose spirits cannot be broken because they know that Christ's body was broken for them. A people who know how to stand against wickedness with a sword in hand, a twinkle in their eye, a smile on their face, and a joyful hymn in their heart. Death came for Christ, and it couldn't hold him. Christ rose from the grave and gave a commission to his church to advance his kingdom, to see it spread like yeast throughout a batch of dough, to disciple the nations, to bring forth a multitude no one can number from all tribes, peoples, and languages. This mission will be successful. Christ will have his inheritance. This world is his, and as we fight, we rejoice in the victory he has won. Our calling is faithfulness. The results are in our Lord's hands, and we know that he will not fail. Soli Deo Gloria.